All right, folks, we have some disturbing breaking news regarding the guy that Donald Trump is putting in charge of the monthly jobs reports as the new Bureau of Labor Statistics commissioner. Not only is he unqualified, inexperienced, highly partisan, and condemned by both the left and the right, it turns out he was also at the January 6th insurrection. That's him right there in the little yellow circle. That's E.J. Antony as a violent mob storms the Capitol in an attempt to overthrow the government and install Donald Trump into an unelected second term, perhaps for life. So looks like we know now why he got the job. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Yep, this guy is bad news, folks. So NBC broke the news, but we'll just look at this picture here by Mediaite. Trump pick for jobs data chief was at the Capitol on January 6th, but White House says he was in town for meetings. Interesting. So before we get into the NBC reporting, here's Trump making the announcement just a couple of days ago. He says, "I'm pleased to announce that I am nominating the highly respected economist, Dr. E.J. Antony, as the next commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Our economy is booming, and E.J. will ensure that the numbers released are honest and accurate. I know E.J. Antony will do an incredible job in his new role. Congratulations, E.J." Okay. We'll get into the reaction from both the left and the right because there's a consensus, right? There are very few things about America that we have consensus in these days. You know, dogs are cool, you know, ice cream is great, and E.J. Antony is not good for this job. And that was before we found out that he was at the Capitol during a violent insurrection against the federal government. But let's look at the NBC News reports. Trump Bureau of Labor Statistics nominee was a bystander outside Capitol on January 6th, White House says. The White House said E.J. Antony was in town for meetings unrelated to Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Let's see. Donald Trump's pick to run the Bureau of Labor Statistics was among the crowd outside the Capitol on January 6, 2021, with the White House saying he was a bystander who wandered over after seeing the coverage on the news. E.J. Antony, an economist from the Heritage Foundation, nominated by Trump this week after the president fired the previous BLS head, appears in numerous videos posted on social media of the crowd on the Capitol grounds. The footage shows Antony approximately an hour after the mob removed police barricades. The footage appears to show him leaving the grounds as people entered the Capitol and not entering the building. Antony is on the west side of the Capitol in one video, archived from the social media website Parler, and appears in surveillance footage posted online by the Republican-led Committee on House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight. Reached by NBC News on Tuesday, Antony declined to comment, and I imagine you would. It would be easy to say, listen, I just saw what was going on, and I admit I was curious, but damn it, I never entered the building. I condemn the violence, and I recognize that President Joe Biden won the 2020 election fair and square, and I don't support anything to the contrary. I totally disavow January 6th and its violence, in its aims. Even though I'm a Trump supporter, I accept the results of the 2020 election. Joe Biden won fair and square. Instead, he declined to comment. A White House official said Wednesday that Antony was in Washington on January 6 for an in-person meeting with his then-employer at an office blocks away from the Capitol, and that he did not cross any barricades or participate in any demonstrations. The footage does not show Antony crossing barricades or demonstrating. Again, it'd be super simple to be like, hey, listen, I know this looks bad. I know this looks bad that I'm standing just, among a horde of violent Trump insurrectionists as they storm the Capitol. I was not part of them, and I condemn that. I condemn the effort. I condemn the aims. I condemn any attempts to overturn a free and fair election. He could do that, but he's declining to. And given, I'm pretty sure that the BLS head has to be confirmed by the Senate, which is why the previous commissioner, yes, a Biden appointee, but she was confirmed overwhelmingly by a supermajority, 86 senators, which meant dozens of Republicans voted for her, including J.D. Vance, when he was a senator, by the way. So the current vice president voted to confirm the Biden appointee that Trump fired on grounds of malfeasance, even though he couldn't prove it. Set that aside. During Antony's Senate confirmation, you bet your ass that every Democrat should and likely will ask him, hey, let's talk about January 6th. Do you tacitly endorse January 6th? Do you tacitly endorse the idea that the election was stolen and that Joe Biden didn't win fair and square? And they should grill him relentlessly on that. But let's continue. The Parler video, which was archived by ProPublica, shows Antony walking away from the crowd on the west side of the Capitol grounds. Tear gas was in the air, and conservative radio host Alex Jones can be heard speaking over a megaphone. At that time, police were struggling to hold off the mob from taking over the inauguration platform. The crowd had surrounded the building but not yet entered the Capitol. Other footage shows Antony on the east side of the Capitol building walking south away from the building. Quote, these pictures show E.J. Antony, a bystander to the events of January 6, observing and then leaving the Capitol area, said White House spokesperson Taylor Rogers in an emailed statement. E.J. was in town for meetings, and it is wrong and defamatory to suggest that E.J. engaged in anything inappropriate or illegal. Nobody is suggesting that. It's just kind of weird that he was in attendance as a Trump-supporting mob surged the Capitol. Nobody says that he participated in it. Nobody said that he engaged in violence or any illegal behavior. But given his presence there, and given that he's a highly partisan, unqualified, inexperienced pick by Trump, and that Trump prizes loyalty above all else, I think it is fair game to wonder, did you support January 6? Did you condemn January 6? What about Trump's unlawful criminal attempts to overturn a free and fair election? Where do you stand on that, E.J. Antony? Because it goes to credibility, doesn't it? Trump put you in a position to produce these jobs report numbers, and we have to assume that you're going to do an honest and fair job even when Trump wants you to say something different. That's what we need to know. But you've given us now abundant reason to believe that you're just going to tell Trump what he wants to hear. This was E.J. Antony on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast after the BLS commissioner under Biden was fired, but before he was named to be her successor. Listen to what he says. It's really ominous.
I want to talk about something you've been on here for 4 years complained about, and that is the Bureau of Labor Statistics and whether we get accurate numbers. Now, everybody's talking about the number here. It's 250,000 jobs. They're like on the downside. It turns out we didn't get, and now it's a restatement. What in the hell's going on there? And have we put in our own person into BLS? Is a MAGA Republican that President Trump knows and trusts? Are they running the Bureau of Labor Statistics yet, sir?
No, unfortunately, Steve, we still haven't gotten there. And I think that's part of the reason why we continue to have all of these different data problems. You know,
I want to talk about something you've been on here for.
So, in other words, Donald Trump needs to have a MAGA Republican loyalist in charge of the numbers, according to E.J. Antony. Well, why? Is it because you're going to tell him what he wants to hear, irrespective of the truth? Again, let's look into this. Antony and I discussed the firing on C-SPAN last week. I asked Antony several times to address the critical statement by former Trump BLS commissioner and former longtime Heritage economist, so again, a right-winger and a former Trump appointee, on the meritless and destructive firing, which he did not do. So he refused to actually address this. Moreover, conservative economists outside William Beach are also condemning E.J. Antony's appointment. Some economists, including Stan Voger, a senior fellow at the conservative American Enterprise Institute, described Antony as unfit for the position. Quote, he's utterly unqualified and as partisan as it gets. And then that economist, that conservative economist, retweet, yeah, I did say this about this guy. Not good. We should also point out that E.J. Antony has suggested publicly on Fox News that maybe the monthly jobs reports just need to go away. Right? I mean, we can't trust the data, right? We should probably suspend them. Those are vital reports relied on both by the Federal Reserve, which sets, interest rates and fiscal policy, monetary policy, and by the private sector as well. Businesses looking to invest, businesses looking to determine whether or not they should hire more, whether they should, produce layoffs, what they should do. Those jobs reports are vital. And because they have been bad for Trump lately, his new BLS appointee, who again was at January 6, even though he didn't engage in violence, didn't invade the Capitol, at least there's no evidence that he did, was in attendance at an event dedicated to overturning the results of a free and fair election, who's been condemned by conservative economists as being too partisan, who says that the BLS needs to be under MAGA control. It's also saying that we should conceal reports if they're bad for Trump. As Mediaite reports, Trump hires MAGA data chief, sparking alarm from conservatives and liberals. So, Manhattan Institute senior fellow Jessica Rydell replied to Antony's Fox remarks, arguing senators who vote to confirm Antony are voting to essentially eviscerate the BLS and its jobs data. Again, a conservative, saying, this guy can't be trusted. Jonah Goldberg, a conservative. This will reassure literally no one who isn't already all in for Trump, isn't already all in for Trump's version of reality. And it will worry lots of folks who hoped to be proven wrong. Another conservative. Independent journalist Isaac Saul added, I've hesitated to comment on this nomination, but it's quite obvious Antony is not qualified. He's worse than not qualified. Actually, he is agenda-driven, untrustworthy, and wasting no time pushing to limit the public's access to critical economic data. Below are some more reactions from across the political spectrum. I don't think I've ever publicly criticized any presidential nominee before, said Jason Furman. Who's Furman? Remind me who Furman is. Isn't he an econ professor? I think he's an econ professor. He is. Professor at Harvard, teaches economics. So let's go back to what he says. But E.J. Antony is completely unqualified to be BLS commissioner. He's an extreme partisan and does not have any relevant expertise. He would be a break from decades of nonpartisan technocrats. James Surowiecki says Trump has made many lots of bad nominations, but Antony to run BLS may be the worst. Someone like Hegseth is not qualified to run the Defense Department, but Antony is anti-qualified. He believes things about the economy, the labor market, and stats that are just not true. Let's see here. Let me actually look at this, because Joey Politano says, an economist so dumb I had to explain to him how the import price index worse last month will now lead the BLS. Import prices just came way below expectations. June was up, blah, 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 and it goes on like this. The import price index means pre-tariff prices. The fact that pre-tariff prices are basically flat means Americans are paying the tariffs, though I wouldn't expect a Heritage Foundation guy like yourself to be smart enough to understand basic stuff like that. Yeah, that guy who just was humiliated in that way is now going to be the BLS commissioner. Conservative Richard Hanania says, how shallow is the MAGA talent pool? E.J. Antony, who's going to be collecting labor statistics, went on an economics program that doesn't rank within the top 100. He appears to have published one article with one citation. His predecessor had over 1,300 citations. Senator Patty Murray. Any senator who votes to confirm this partisan hack is voting to shred the integrity of our nation's best economic and jobs data, which underpin our entire economy. If Antony gets confirmed, I hope Republicans like playing make-believe, because that's all BLS data will become. Robert Reich, former labor secretary under President Clinton, says the independence of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is vital. If politicized, it can't be trusted as a source of information. Who did Trump just put in charge of the agency? E.J. Antony, chief economist at the Heritage Foundation and contributor to Project 2025. And I forgot about that. Yes, he was a Project 2025 author as well. To know, or just to remind people just how highly partisan he is. Justin Wolfers, economist, said, let's focus on qualifications. Antony finished grad school 5 years ago at Northern Illinois with no obvious distinction. His dissertation is meh and involved no research on labor markets or data collection. He has never published a paper, and his life's work has earned one citation. This record would be insufficient to earn a job as a junior staffer at BLS, and now he's going to be running the whole thing. Gary Winsett, since E.J. Antony is now Trump's nominee to head the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I wanted to flash back to that time when I, a nobody professor in Vermont, had to explain to him some very basic facts about labor statistics. This guy's a joke. Let's take a look here. E.J. Antony, how can the economy be bad when jobs are growing so because everyone has two of them? And this was E.J. Antony under Biden, of course, in 2024. Readers added context. This is not the case. Multiple job holders are around 5% of the total employed, roughly where it was pre-pandemic and below where it was in the 1990s. So he had to be community noted. Gary Winsett, this is factually wrong. The percentage of people with two jobs is down, and also most likely people have two jobs are people with postgraduate degrees. So he was humiliated there as well. Joey Politano, we already referenced that. So yeah, folks, just to recap, E.J. Antony is highly partisan. He's MAGA as hell. He's inexperienced. He's unqualified. He's vastly inferior to his predecessor who was fired. He was also in attendance at January 6th. Again, when the day that violent Trump insurrectionists attempted to overthrow the government, he's being condemned by the left and the right. It's just bad news. He seems highly unqualified for the job, and maybe we should make more of a stink about this. And again, he has to go before the Senate to get confirmation, and Democrats should have a fucking field day with it and point out that he's a moron, that he's unqualified, that he's inexperienced, that he's a partisan hack, the likes of which we've never seen. He has been condemned by people on both sides of the aisle, and they need to grill him about the 2020 election and January 6th and how he feels about both of those things. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.